For decades, the world knew Rock Hudson as the perfect man, tall, handsome, and irresistibly charming. He was the silver screen heartthrob every woman dreamed of and every man admired. But behind that immaculate smile, Hudson lived a double life, one that Hollywood demanded he keep buried. He was not just hiding who he loved, he was hiding who he truly was. In the 1960s, when fame came with invisible chains, Hudson found something real, a quiet, secret love that the world could never see. His name was Lee Garlington, a young film extra who would later call Rock the kindest man I ever met. Their story wasn't one of glamour or scandal. It was one of impossible love, whispered behind locked doors and camera flashes. What Garlington would reveal decades later was not just a confession. It was the truth Hudson could never speak aloud, the double life of a Hollywood idol. Rock Hudson's rise to stardom began in the late 1940s when Roy Harold Scherer Jr., a shy Midwestern boy from Winnetka, Illinois, reinvented himself under a new name, one that sounded as solid and untouchable as his image. By the mid-1950s, he was Hollywood's leading man, starring in hits like Magnificent Obsession, All That Heaven Allows, and Giant, which earned him an Oscar nomination. On-screen, he embodied the perfect American hero. Off-screen, he was a man constantly looking over his shoulder. Hudson's sexuality was an open secret among industry insiders. Co-stars, directors, and assistants all knew, yet no one dared to speak it aloud. The Hollywood system thrived on illusion, and for an actor like Hudson, exposure could mean ruin. Studio executives arranged photo ops with actresses, gossip columnists were paid to fabricate romantic stories, and when rumors grew too loud, his agent orchestrated a marriage to his secretary, Phyllis Gates, in 1955. They divorced 3 years later, leaving both sides wounded and confused. Gates would later claim she never knew the truth. Friends of Hudson insisted she always did. By the early 1960s, Rock was tired of pretending. The fame that had once felt like freedom became a gilded cage. He longed for normalcy. Dinners at home, road trips, someone to laugh with without fear of being seen. That yearning led him to a quiet encounter that would change his life. In 1962, on the Universal lot, a young extra named Lee Garlington lingered outside Hudson's cottage, pretending to read Variety. When Hudson walked past, their eyes met briefly, just a glance, no words, yet something unspoken began. Garlington would later say that in that instant he just wanted to see him, to understand what all the rumors were about. Neither of them knew that fleeting glance would begin one of Hollywood's most secret and tragic love stories. The Hidden Romance. A year after that quiet moment outside Universal Studios, Lee Garlington received a phone call from one of Rock Hudson's friends. The message was short but life-changing. "Rock would like to meet you." Garlington, then in his early 20s, could hardly believe it. By 1962, Hudson was one of the most famous men in the world, 6'4", impossibly handsome, and adored by millions. Yet behind the perfection was a man who craved the one thing his fame denied him: an honest connection. Their first meeting took place at Hudson's Beverly Hills home. Garlington later recalled being scared to death. Rock greeted him casually, offered him a beer, and spoke with a gentleness that immediately disarmed him. Nothing happened that night, just conversation, laughter, and a quiet understanding that both were stepping into dangerous territory. When Garlington left, Hudson smiled and said, "Let's get together again." From that night on, they did. Their relationship blossomed in the shadows. Lee would drive to Rock's house after work, stay the night, and sneak out at dawn in his Chevy Nova, coasting silently down the hill so the neighbors wouldn't hear the engine. "We thought we were being clever," he later said. They shared dinners, road trips through the South, and nights watching television in silence, pretending, for a few hours, that they were just an ordinary couple. They even attended film premieres together, though always with female dates to keep up appearances. Once, at an event, they ran into Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. Newman gave Lee a knowing smile, the kind of smile that said he understood everything without a single word. They laughed about it later, but both knew the risk was real. In those days, coming out meant the end of a career. "Nobody in their right mind came out," Garlington said years later. "We all pretended to be straight." For Rock, the secrecy was painful, but necessary. After a fan broke into his home while he and Lee were away and slept in his bed, he panicked. The woman could have found their private photos, shirtless pictures of Lee in a bedside drawer, and destroyed everything he had worked for. From that moment on, Hudson had gates installed and forbade anyone from taking pictures of them together. Their love became a whispered secret behind closed doors, safe, fragile, and doomed to fade with time, the gentle giant and the breaking point. By 1965, the quiet paradise Rock Hudson and Lee Garlington had built was beginning to crumble. The pressure of secrecy, the endless deception, and the imbalance between them slowly pushed their relationship to its limits. Lee, young and still searching for identity, later admitted that he had been looking for a father figure, someone to make him feel safe and grounded. But Rock, for all his strength and fame, wasn't that man. "He was a gentle giant," Lee said softly years later, "but he wasn't a strong personality. Their love had been tender, but it couldn't survive the walls that Hollywood forced them to build around it." When they parted ways, it wasn't dramatic, just quiet heartbreak. They drifted apart, still caring, but knowing that staying together would destroy them both. Hudson buried himself in work, taking on film after film to fill the silence. Pillow Talk, Send Me No Flowers, and later, Tobruk. He had perfected the role of the charming ladies' man, all while privately mourning the only man he ever truly loved. The studio system had trained him well. His smile could hide anything. In the 1970s, when Rock transitioned to television, starring in Macmillan and Wife, the facade remained intact. He dated women publicly, laughed in interviews, and denied rumors that had followed him for decades. Only close friends, like Doris Day and his business manager Wallace Sheft, knew the truth. Hollywood's golden boy was growing lonelier by the year, confined not by fame, but by fear. Behind the glamour, Hudson struggled with exhaustion and isolation. He couldn't form lasting relationships. He couldn't risk exposure. The few who entered his private world saw a man of deep kindness and quiet sadness. Even his marriage to Phyllis Gates years earlier, a union largely orchestrated by his agent to silence gossip, had been a desperate attempt to appear normal. By the early 1980s, Rock had begun to accept that he might never live openly as himself, but fate had other plans. In 1984, while filming Dynasty, Hudson began to feel ill. He brushed it off as stress and fatigue, but within months, the truth became undeniable. Doctors confirmed what he feared most. He had AIDS, a disease that at that time meant certain death. By then, he and Lee hadn't spoken in nearly 20 years. Yet when the world learned of his diagnosis, it wasn't just a scandal. It was the moment that changed everything. The revelation and the world's reaction. When news broke in July 1985 that Rock Hudson had AIDS, the world stopped. He was the first major Hollywood star to be diagnosed publicly with a disease that, at the time, carried almost unimaginable stigma. For decades, he had been the symbol of masculine perfection, the man who made Doris Day blush and Elizabeth Taylor laugh. Now, the world saw him as the face of an illness that most people didn't even understand. It wasn't just shocking, it was devastating. For Lee Garlington, who had long moved on to a quieter life as a stockbroker, the news was like a blow to the chest. "I was shocked," he said later. "AIDS killed everybody in those days." He tried to reach out, calling the people who were caring for Hudson, but they told him it was too late. Rock was weak, barely able to speak, and they feared he wouldn't even recognize him. The only thing Lee could do was remember him, not as the dying man in the hospital, but as the one who used to laugh beside him in the car, driving through the countryside with the top down, pretending the world didn't exist. Hudson had always been private, but his diagnosis forced him to confront what he had hidden all his life. When his doctors in Paris confirmed AIDS, he initially wanted to keep it secret, but his health deteriorated so quickly that the story leaked to the press. On July 25, 1985, the official confirmation came: Rock Hudson was battling AIDS. The reaction was immediate and cruel. Some tabloids treated it as scandal, others as tragedy. But amidst the noise, something profound began to happen. For the first time, millions of Americans saw the human face of a disease they had been taught to fear. In his final months, Hudson received visits from a handful of close friends, including Elizabeth Taylor and Doris Day. They described him as gentle, brave, and at peace with the truth that had defined his life, that love, even when hidden, was worth it. Taylor would later credit Hudson's courage with helping her dedicate her life to AIDS activism, founding the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation in his honor. What had begun as a deeply personal tragedy was turning into a global awakening. On October 2, 1985, Rock Hudson died in his sleep at the age of 59. His death marked not only the end of an era, but the beginning of a conversation that Hollywood, and the world, could no longer avoid. For Lee Garlington, it marked something even deeper: the final goodbye to the man he had loved and lost long before the world ever knew his name, the confession and the lost letters. After Rock Hudson's funeral, Hollywood spoke of legacy, glamour, and courage. But far away from the cameras, Lee Garlington opened a book that would change everything he thought he knew about their relationship. It was 1986 when Rock Hudson, His Story, the actor's authorized biography, was released. In its final chapters, amid recollections from friends and colleagues, came a passage that broke Lee's heart. Rock had called him his true love. He even wrote that Lee and his mother were the only people he had ever loved. When Lee read those words, he said, "I broke down and cried. I just lost it." For years, he had assumed their love was a fleeting secret, a fragile chapter in Hudson's long, complicated life. Now, decades later, he realized it had meant everything to Rock. That discovery filled him with both comfort and sorrow. Comfort, because he had mattered more than he ever knew sorrow, because he hadn't been there at the end. "I have felt so guilty about not being there for him," he told people years later. "I had no idea how deeply he loved me." As time passed, Garlington began uncovering fragments of their hidden life together, pieces of a love story the world never saw. In an antique box, he kept the few photos they had taken during their time together. Most were of Rock alone, smiling casually on the beach or beside his car. There was only one picture of them together, taken discreetly at a bar in New Orleans. "He never allowed pictures of us," Lee explained. "It was too dangerous. His agent warned him that if anyone saw one of his boyfriends in a photo, people would start to suspect." But there was one exception. Their 1963 vacation to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, arranged on the recommendation of Elizabeth Taylor. There, far from Hollywood's glare, they were finally free. "We walked on the beach and took pictures of each other," Garlington recalled. "We drove around in an open Jeep. There were no paparazzi. No one knew who we were. We were just comfortable being us." Those days, captured in a few forgotten photographs, were the closest either of them ever came to living an honest life. The secrets he took to the grave and Garlington's final goodbye. As the years passed, the world learned that Rock Hudson's homosexuality had been only one of many secrets he kept In the 2023 HBO documentary, Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed, close friends and biographers revealed how deeply private the actor truly was, even to those who thought they knew him best. He had affairs with other actors, but never named them publicly, determined to protect their identities. He refused to name the man, one insider said, because he didn't want to ruin another person's life. There were even whispers that Hudson had fathered a child long before fame, the result of a brief affair when he was just 19, still known as Roy Fitzgerald. According to the story, the woman wrote to him years later, claiming she had borne his son. Whether true or not, Hudson never spoke of it. Like so much of his life, it was a mystery buried beneath charm and silence. "I like to keep my secrets to myself," he once said. "I guess they'll die with me." He lived that way until the end, a man both loved and lonely. Even his marriage to Phyllis Gates in 1955, orchestrated by his agent to silence gossip, was more performance than partnership. When she later wrote her memoir, she insisted she hadn't known he was gay. Yet many in Hudson's circle doubted her ignorance. "It's inconceivable she didn't know," said one friend. "Everyone in Hollywood knew." The marriage crumbled within 3 years, leaving Hudson once again alone behind his polished image. By the time of his death in 1985, he had built a fortress of secrecy around his private life. But in choosing to publicly reveal his AIDS diagnosis, Hudson shattered a much greater silence, the one surrounding an epidemic that had already claimed thousands. His courage gave a human face to the disease, transforming him from Hollywood idol to unlikely hero. His death, though tragic, sparked compassion, activism, and awareness across the globe. Decades later, Lee Garlington spoke of him not as a movie star, but as a man who loved quietly and lived fearfully. "He didn't have the chance to live the way he wanted," Lee said. "He had to hide." Yet, when Garlington himself passed away in December 2024, at the age of 86, from complications of prostate cancer, he was finally at peace. His husband, Paul, shared the final chapter of their intertwined story. "I'd like him to be remembered as the love of many people's lives, but most notably, mine and Rock Hudson's." Rock Hudson's story reminds us that even the brightest stars can live in the darkest shadows. Behind every perfect image lies a truth too painful to share, and a love too real to forget. For Lee Garlington, that love never truly ended. It just became part of history. What do you think Rock Hudson's life would have been like if he'd lived in a time when he could be open about who he was? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next untold story from Hollywood's hidden past.